The doctor begins an autopsy, but goes to the bathroom before starting. When he returns, the woman's eyes are open, and he discovers something shocking. It was another heavy dawn at New Mexico General Hospital. The city outside seemed asleep, but within those cold white walls, life continued to slip away silently. In the basement of the hospital, where the Forensic Institute was located, Dr. Tobias Camacho hung up his gown. His movements were slow, almost automatic. For years, he had repeated the same routine, putting on his gloves, checking the papers, turning on the cold lights in the autopsy room, the smell of alcohol, cleaning products, and something that even time could not remove from the walls: the smell of death. It was always the same. Tobias was a quiet man of few gestures and no smile. He had sunken eyes, a tired body, and a loneliness so great that it seemed to fill the entire room. It had been a long time since he remembered what it was like to touch someone who was alive. He only dealt with those who had already passed away, and over time that seemed normal to him, or almost normal. That night, at around 3 in the morning, the phone rang. Nurse Lucia Ramos announced in a low voice, "Doctor, another body has arrived. A woman, about 30 years old, I think. She died on the street and was pronounced dead 6 hours ago. She's already in the elevator." Tobias let out a slight sigh. He took his clipboard, wrote down the time, and went to the preparation room. The stretcher slowly descended in the old elevator, the noise of the motor echoing through the empty hallway. When the door finally opened, there she was. The woman looked as if she were asleep. The white sheet covered her body up to her neck. She was young, with fair skin, and long dark hair still wet from the rain. Her arms were crossed over her chest, and there were purple marks on her wrists. She had no documents or relatives, only a tag on her big toe with the initials SDC. Lucia approached carefully. "I'm going to help you prepare, doctor," she said, smoothing the hair that fell over her face. Tobias just nodded. He pulled his glove up to his elbow and checked the data. Everything seemed normal, but something bothered him. He stretched out his arm and touched the woman's shoulder, as he always did to check for stiffness. But what he felt made him pause for a second. "How strange," Lucia murmured, turning her face without understanding. "The skin is too warm. They said she died 6 hours ago. She should be colder, don't you think?" Lucia frowned. "It could be the weather. It's hot and humid today, even though it's raining," he said, still hesitant. He went to the panel and adjusted the air conditioning. "Let's lower the temperature in the room. I want everything in order." The sound of the air conditioner motor began to blow strongly, and the cold wind soon filled the room. Tobias approached the instrument table and picked up the scalpel. His hand was steady as always, but inside, something was stirring, a slight uneasiness, as if something was not right, but he did not yet know what it was. Lucia put on her gloves carefully, trying to hide the chill that ran up her arms. The air in the room was already cold, but that wasn't what bothered her. It was the silence, a strange silence, heavier than normal. It wasn't just the sound of the rain outside or the noise of the air conditioner running. It was a silence that seemed alive, that seemed to hear everything. Tobias slowly approached the stretcher. The woman's body was still there, motionless, wrapped in that white sheet that hid almost everything except her face. He slowly pulled back the fabric, revealing her chest, arms, and abdomen. "Pass me the surface thermometer, please," he said in a low voice. Lucia handed him the device, glancing sideways at the woman's face. There was something there, a soft, beautiful but strange expression, as if she had been interrupted in the middle of a thought, as if she hadn't finished feeling what she was feeling before she died. Tobias placed the device on the woman's skin, waited, frowned. "This is strange." Lucia approached with the admission form in her hand. "What happened?" "The temperature of 33.8 degrees. That doesn't match the time of death. It was 6 hours ago. It should be below 30, much lower." Lucia smiled nervously. "Maybe the thermometer is malfunctioning. Those hospital devices always break down." He looked at her seriously. "This one is calibrated. I tested it last night." She took a deep breath, trying to relieve the tension. "Then it must be the weather. It's hot and humid today, even though it's raining." Tobias looked at the body again and touched the woman's arm with his fingertips. The skin had a strange softness, It wasn't cold like the others he had seen. It wasn't hard. It was almost alive. "Let's lower the temperature in the room," he said dryly, walking over to the panel and typing in the new number. The air blew harder and colder, like an old machine taking a breath. The light in the room flickered for a second, and then came back on. Lucia shuddered. She hated it when the lights did that, she murmured, leaning against the wall. "This is different," said Tobias, still looking at the woman. "I don't know. It's as if she stopped talking." He didn't want to sound paranoid. The weight of the loneliness of the past, of the memories he was trying to hide, was already enough. He couldn't leave room for thoughts like that. He returned to the table, picked up the folder, wrote down what he had to write down, looked at the body again, and breathed deeply. That woman, even though she was dead, seemed present. It seemed as if at any moment she could open her eyes and say something, but it was just an impression, just another strange night. He forced himself to follow protocol and asked Lucia to start cleaning the body, as they always did. She wet the cloth and slowly wiped the woman's face and neck. And again that chill ran down Dr. Tobias's spine. He said in a low voice, almost without wanting to speak, "Don't you think this woman is too recent?" Tobias didn't answer. He just nodded slowly. Tobias picked up the scalpel again firmly, but his hand wasn't as steady as usual. His fingertips were sweating inside his gloves. He tried to ignore it, took a deep breath, and approached the body, now completely clean and positioned. The main light in the room, the one hanging above the autopsy table, flickered again, a sharp click on the ceiling. The silence was total. Not even the rain made any noise. All he could hear was the rapid, disordered beating of his own heart. The tip of the scalpel hovered in the air a few centimeters from the woman's chest, but suddenly he felt a sharp pain in his stomach. It wasn't physical. It was something else, a feeling of nausea, a heaviness in his chest, as if his body were rejecting this moment. "Give me a minute," he murmured, leaving the scalpel on the steel tray. His voice came out trembling, dry. Lucia looked up in surprise. "It's okay, doctor." He was already leaving the room, one hand on his stomach and the other on the wall for support. He walked quickly to the bathroom at the end of the hall. The ceiling lights hummed. The water from the sink ran through his fingers as he washed his face, trying to calm down. He looked at himself in the mirror. He was pale, his eyes sunken, his breathing short. Meanwhile, in the cold room, Lucia continued to stare at the body. She was still, yes, but not calm. This cold was different. It didn't come only from the air conditioning. It was a cold that came from within, rising up her back. She crossed her arms and stamped her foot on the floor, trying to shake off the feeling. "I'm going to get some coffee," she said quietly, even though there was no one to hear her. She took her badge and left quickly. For a few minutes, the room was empty, completely empty. The lamp above continued to flicker, making the shadows dance in the corners. The tray with the scalpel reflected the flickering light, and the body was still there, motionless, or almost motionless. When Tobias returned, drying his face with a paper towel, he felt his heart leap in his chest even before he opened the door. He didn't know why. An instinct, a warning. He turned the handle, entered, and stopped there in front of the body that had been motionless was no longer the same. The eyes were open, large, black, staring straight at him. "No, it can't be," he whispered, almost breathless. Without meaning to, he bumped into the tray of tools and some fell to the floor with a metallic sound that echoed in the room like a muffled scream. He took 2 steps back, his chest rising and falling erratically, and then came the sound. A faint, wet sound. But of course, the woman was breathing very lightly, very slowly, but she was breathing. "My God!" Tobias shouted, his eyes wide open, his body paralyzed by fear and amazement. He ran to the panel and pressed the emergency button. "Lucia! Lucia!" The nurse appeared seconds later with the cup of coffee still in her hand. "What happened?" Her eyes. She's alive. She's breathing." Lucia looked and saw, and almost dropped the coffee. Oh my God, the sound of the machines could be heard again. Before, they had been silent, but now they beeped slowly, as if some mysterious force had turned everything back on, as if her heart had started beating again. Lucia ran to the stretcher, put her fingers on the woman's neck, looked at Tobias. "She has a pulse, doctor. She has a pulse." And then, for an eternal second, the two remained silent, looking at that woman who had somehow returned from death. She didn't speak or move much, but she was breathing. Minutes later, the wheels of the stretcher cut through the white hallway with haste, squeaking at every turn. The woman, her eyes still half open, was being rushed to the emergency room as if every second counted, and it did. The sheet barely covered her thin body. Her face was pale and sweaty, with small red spots on her cheeks. She was breathing as if she were drowning. Air. The sound was weak and intermittent, but real and alive. Lucia walked beside the stretcher, holding her hand tightly. The nurse's gaze was tense but full of a hope she still didn't want to accept. Hey, stay with me," she said, her voice trembling. "Look at me. What's your name? I need you to talk so your brain stays awake." The woman's eyes blinked slowly, as if fighting against sleep. Her body trembled. Her mouth opened, but no words came out until, between sobs, she murmured in a raspy voice full of pain, "Sofia." She squeezed her hand excitedly. "That's right, Sofia. Stay with me. You're safe now. I'm here." But Sofia didn't respond. Her eyes closed slowly, as if her body could no longer hold on, and she fainted. Lucia shouted, "Someone fainted! She fainted! Bring the defibrillator. Prepare oxygen. Quick!" Tobias watched everything from afar. He didn't move. He stood at the entrance to the room with the medical file in his hands. The sound of the machines, the rushing around of the team, everything around him seemed distant. His head was spinning, his eyes fixed on the piece of paper, more precisely on a signature at the bottom of the death certificate. He read it again, once, twice, 3 times. It said in clear handwriting, "Dr. Matteo Albarran," and below, the date of the signature, 2 months ago. But Dr. Matteo had been dead for some time. Tobias himself had gone to the wake. He had seen the closed coffin. He had heard his colleagues cry and talk about how much Matteo had contributed to the hospital. There was no doubt. Matteo died of a massive heart attack at the age of 58, one of the few friends Tobias had had in his life. So how could someone who no longer existed sign the death certificate of a woman who was now breathing again? Tobias's hand was shaking. The paper was moving with the air from the emergency air conditioning. He tried to take a deep breath, but the air wouldn't go in properly. A heavy anguish rose from his stomach to his chest. He looked at Sofia, already being intubated by the team, surrounded by machines, tubes, and hands racing against time, so fragile, so far away, and yet still alive. Lucia turned her face and saw Tobias standing there motionless. "Doctor, come help, please," she shouted desperately. He did not respond. He kept looking at the sheet as if it were more than a mistake, as if it were a sign, a call from the past, or from the impossible. The sounds of the emergency room continued. Beeps, voices, quick footsteps. Time seemed to move at a different speed in there. But Tobias, even in the midst of the chaos, saw something that no one else noticed on Sofia's neck, well hidden under the sheet. A thin silver necklace hung there. It was dirty, a little darkened by time, but what caught his attention most was what it had. A small crucifix broken right in the middle. A hairline fracture split the tiny cross, turning devotion into a fault line. For a heartbeat, he only looked, letting the room's low hum settle, the fluorescent buzz, the faint tick of cooling metal. It was the kind of object that seemed to carry rooms inside it. A windowless space, the smell of old soap and melted wax, a pair of cracked knuckle hands lowering a cross into a trembling palm. A whisper surfaced from that buried place. "Keep it, or remember." The word frayed before it reached the air. Rain traced slanted lines across an unseen pane. Somewhere a door clicked shut, and the imagined room folded back into silence. He drew a slow breath and steadied himself, aware of how the cold made his skin feel tighter beneath the gloves. The cut across the little crucifix didn't lessen its weight. If anything, the break made it look more deliberate, as if it had survived something instead of failed. He leaned closer, careful not to touch, eyes adjusting to the dull sheen of tarnish and the thin thread of light that ran along the crack like a stitched seam waiting for a knot. Only when his pulse settled did he allow himself to move in. The top part still hung on the chain, the other part hung loose, held by a twisted wire, as if someone had tried to fix it and given up. He approached slowly and respectfully, almost as if asking permission to look. He touched the pendant with the tip of his glove. It was light and cold on the back, with hand-engraved letters, now half erased, of the cross, and below it a recent date, very recent. November 2nd, Tobias frowned, which made the air in the room feel colder. Day of the Dead, he muttered to himself. A chill ran down his neck. The broken crucifix, the engraved name, the date. Everything seemed to have a weight he couldn't explain. Later, outside the emergency room, Tobias returned to his office and closed the door. The noise of the hospital remained outside. Only the ticking of the clock accompanied him. He sat down in his chair and turned on the computer. He needed to understand. He needed to find some clue as to who Sofia was. He searched the hospital files. Nothing. There was no record, no admission, no discharge, no tests, no history. It was as if she had never been there. He tried other databases, other clinics, nearby hospitals, and nothing. But the name Sofia de la Cruz kept ringing in his head. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and tried to remember something. It was hidden in his memory, and little by little, it began to emerge. The smell of smoke, the sound of sirens, people running, and then the memory from years ago. A fire, an old building in the city center, an underground psychiatric care facility. Smoke crawled along the ceiling of the lower corridor, turning the fluorescent light into a wavering smear. The stairwell air was hot and chemical. The alarms did not ring so much as hammer. A steel door marked B2 hissed when it opened, and the hallway beyond was narrower than it should have been. White tiles, brown water bleeding from a sprinkler head that never fully came to life. "Lower level is contained," a voice declared. Measured, almost bored. Dr. Matteo Albaran stepped through the haze with a clipboard, his tie damp, his gaze already calculating. "We stabilize upstairs. Close this corridor." A nurse grabbed his sleeve. "We still have one. Patient 4071. The numbers were bitten off. Urgent. Private. Somewhere down the hall a gurney scraped. Rubber on tile. He glimpsed a wristband catching the light. 4071. Straps. Dark hair plastered to a pale forehead. Eyes open, unblinking, looking through the smoke, and straight at him. "Triage is on 1, Matteo said, not looking back. "Secure the door." For a breath, no one moved. The sirens outside rose, then fell, like wind pulling at the building. Someone shoved a bar. The steel door began to swing. He felt his own feet root to the floor. The eyes at the end of the hall found him again. No plea, no sound. Only a kind of accusing stillness that made the moment heavy, personal. "Doctor," Matteo snapped, as if to a shadow. "You are here to observe. Step back." He did. The door sealed with a dull, final thud, and the latch clicked like a tiny verdict. In the sudden muffled quiet, he could hear only the slow drip from the failed sprinkler, and his own breath catching in his throat, along with the echo of a number he would not forget. 4071. He was young, just starting his career. He was there only as an observer, but he saw everything. Screams, flames, names among the survivors or among those who did not make it. Someone with that name, a woman with fair skin and dark hair. Sofia de la Cruz. "No, it can't be," he said softly, feeling his body grow heavy. He got up from his chair and paced back and forth across the office. His hands were shaking. The memory was vague but powerful. A burned patient. Desperate, she was asking for help and no one was listening. And the name, he was sure, was hers, or someone with the same face. He returned to the computer and typed the name once more. Nothing. It was as if the past had been erased or buried, and yet there she was, back again with a broken crucifix, and a name that should no longer exist. The sun was just rising when the bell in the medical examiner's office rang, a sharp, impatient sound that was heard through the almost empty corridors of the hospital. Tobias was sitting in his office, his eyes still red from not sleeping well. What had happened to Sofia? was still fresh in his mind, churning like a nightmare that won't go away even when you're awake. Lucia tapped her fingers on her coffee cup, tense, waiting for someone. Dr. Tobias got up slowly, his gown wrinkled, his mind confused. He opened the door to the ward with some hesitation. Standing there in the doorway was a man who didn't seem to belong there. He wore a gray suit, dark tie, and shiny shoes, without a drop of sweat, even though it was already hot. He stood up straight, his face clean, his eyes cold, very cold. "Dr. Tobias Camacho," he said without smiling, showing an ID card too quickly to read. "Ah, yes. How can I help you? I'm from the government. I need a report. The woman who was admitted last night, emergency, scheduled autopsy. I want the complete documentation." Tobias felt his heart skip a beat. There was no official order, no call from the bosses, and even stranger, he hadn't even finished the final report. The woman was alive. She is still being evaluated. "I haven't finished." He didn't understand. The man interrupted him curtly. "I need the complete autopsy report. Signed. The woman died. Period. That's the official version." Tobias looked at that expressionless face. The emptiness in that man's eyes was frightening. He didn't seem to be from the government. He seemed like someone trained to lie, to cover his tracks, to make disappear what shouldn't exist. "Did you see her in person?" he dared to ask. "It's none of your business. Just hand over the documents and don't leave out any details, including the name." "Name?" He feigned surprise. She had no identification. The man gave a cold, annoyed smile. "Everyone has a name, doctor. You know that." He remained silent for a few seconds. The man looked at him as if expecting obedience, as if he were already used to people saying yes. But something inside Tobias changed. A weight began to grow in his chest, a discomfort that came not only from the lie, but also from the guilt and the memory of that name engraved on a broken crucifix. He returned to his office with heavy steps. He sat down, opened the drawer, took a deep breath, took out a blank sheet of paper, and calmly filled it out. He wrote a false report: cardiac arrest, estimated time of death, signature, no personal information, no names, no mention of what really happened. He folded the sheet carefully, returned to the door, and handed it to the man. "Here's what you asked for." The man took it without looking, put it in an envelope, put it in his jacket, and before leaving said, "Take good care of what you saw. Sometimes knowing too much can be dangerous." Tobias stood there still, feeling sweat running down his back. He knew that man wasn't there to protect anyone. He was there to hide something, and that something was alive, asleep in a bed, with a name that the world seemed to want to erase. Sofia. The morning light entered weakly through the window of the intensive care unit. It was soft, almost timid, a golden ray passing through the blinds, drawing lines on the white sheet where Sofia slept. But it was not a peaceful sleep. It was restless, heavy. Her body moved, sometimes a little, sometimes with small spasms. Tobias sat there beside her, his eyes tired, his shoulders slumped. He couldn't leave. Something kept him next to that woman, as if, even though he didn't know why, he had to protect her, or maybe fix something. Sofia suddenly opened her eyes, small and filled with fear. She was breathing fast, as if she were running from something only she could see. Hey, calm down," said Tobias, carefully bringing his face closer to hers. "You're in the hospital. Everything is fine now. No one is going to hurt you here." She looked around, frightened, her eyes searching for a way out, for a familiar face. But there was nothing but that man in a white coat with trembling hands. "Water," she whispered with difficulty. He grabbed the glass and put it to her lips. She took a sip, then another, as if she hadn't had water in days. When she finished, her eyes filled with tears, and she began to cry softly, as if asking for forgiveness for existing. Tobias took a deep breath. "I have to check you out." "Yes. See how you are inside. It will be quick, I promise." She didn't answer, just closed her eyes again as if giving up. He slowly lowered the sheet and carefully turned her body over, aside. That's when he saw it, her back. What was there was not normal. There were marks, many long, deep, and regular scars, some old and white, others still red and poorly healed. Burn marks as if something hot had touched her, or she had been given electric shocks or tests. Tobias swallowed hard. "Who did this to you?" he asked in a low voice, knowing she would not have the strength to answer. Then he saw it. High up on her lower back, almost hidden by a fold of skin, there was a small, discreet tattoo made with a thick needle in a rustic old style. A number 5 digits, and next to it, the faded letters HSIA. Tobias's blood ran cold. San Ignacio Hospital, closed 12 years ago. He took a step back and felt the pressure drop. He had to lean on the edge of the bed. That couldn't be. That number. That code. Sofia turned her face with her eyes still closed. A murmur escaped from her chapped lips. "I've been here before." Tobias stood still. He didn't know if he had heard correctly, but something inside Tobias broke, because now he remembered. He remembered that number. He remembered her face. He remembered what they did to her, and he couldn't say anything. Sofia slowly opened her eyes. Her voice came from far away, hoarse, as if the words had to travel years to reach her mouth. "You were there." Tobias slowly raised his eyes. "What did you say?" She turned her face toward him, her eyes slowly filling with tears. It was a quiet, deep cry, one of those that cannot be explained. You saw me, and yet you let me die." If you were in Tobias's place right now, would you forgive him or not? Tell me in the comments while we keep going. His body froze. She squeezed his hand gently, but with all the weight of what she was carrying inside. "I begged," she whispered. "I screamed. I cried. I asked to live. And you." Tobias felt the world spinning. That voice. The pain in those words. He didn't want to remember, but now he remembered it as if it were yesterday. The dark room, the strong smell, the file of patient number 4071, a fragile young girl, a look of despair he could never forget but chose to bury. She had a look that asked for help, not with screams, but in silence. And he, out of fear, out of cowardice, out of obedience, signed as they told him to, as if his life wasn't worth the trouble. "Forgive me," he murmured, his voice trembling. He was just a resident. He didn't know what to do. They had threatened him, but there were no excuses. Sofia closed her eyes and said nothing more. Tobias, his eyes filled with tears, couldn't take it anymore. He left the room, stumbling over his own feet down the hallway, his hand covering his mouth. His stomach churned, and he fell to his knees next to the water fountain and vomited. The sound of his pain echoed throughout the empty hospital. He tried to calm down, got up, went to the administration office, entered the office of the shift supervisor, took off his badge and his gown, and placed them on the desk. "I want to quit now." Before the woman could answer, a knock on the door interrupted him. It was him, the man in the gray suit. "Doctor, we need to talk." Tobias turned around. The presence of that man cooled the air. "I can't go on. Not after what I discovered." The man's expression didn't change. He just approached slowly. "You talk too much, doctor, and that tires others." His tone was calm, but behind his voice there was a clear, cold, direct threat. Tobias understood. Sofia shouldn't be alive, and now he shouldn't know that either. Dawn fell heavily on New Mexico. The hospital corridors were empty, as if even the walls knew that something could not go on like this. The lights were off in some areas. A strange silence filled the place. Not even the machines beeped as before. It was as if time were holding its breath. Tobias was sitting at the back of the hospital chapel, his head down, his hands dirty with guilt. The conversation with the man in the suit still echoed in his mind, but what hurt the most was what he himself had done, or rather, what he had failed to do. Sofia's face when she said, "You let me die," was etched in her eyes. That was when Lucia entered, her steps firm and confident. She was no longer carrying coffee or papers. She was carrying something heavier, courage. She sat down next to him and remained silent for a few seconds, then spoke bluntly. "You can continue hiding, pretending that nothing happened, or you can do what you should have done years ago." He did not respond. She insisted, "You have an opportunity, not to forget, but to make amends. At least once. Time." Tobias looked up at her like someone waking up, like someone breathing again after a long time underwater. A sigh escaped him with difficulty. "They're coming for us." "Yes, they are," she said without hesitation. "But we're not going to stay here waiting." He remained silent, then slowly nodded his head. That was it. The choice had been made. It was after 3 in the morning when the two of them entered the U area. Lucia pushed the door carefully. Sofia was asleep, the broken crucifix still around her neck, the cables on her arms, her face calmer, as if she were waiting for something to change. Tobias approached her and touched her shoulder affectionately. "Sofia, it's me. We're going to get you out of here." She opened her eyes slowly. She didn't speak. She just looked. And for a moment in that look, he saw trust. Lucia turned off the monitors with skill. She didn't just switch them off. She silenced the entire chain. On the wall console, her fingers moved fast. Alarm pause, transport profile, maintenance window. So the central board read U17, test instead of loss of signal. The bedside screen went dark, without a single chirp. The green power light a slow, harmless blink no one bothers to question at 3 in the morning. "West Service Route," Lucia whispered, already rolling the IV pole to the far side to break the line of sight. The dome camera in the corner missed a slim triangle of floor by the linen cupboard. They had mapped that blind spot with a phone flashlight the night before. She swung a clean sheet over the rails like a curtain, turned the pulse ox sensor under the pillow to keep the hub pacified for another minute, and checked her watch. 12 seconds to clear the door after the latch. At the nurse's station, a mug steamed by an open chart. The night RN looked up, met Lucia's eyes, and looked away. One practiced, merciful second of blindness. Past the medication room, the service elevator waited with its panel glowing low. Lucia swiped and keyed 2413. The doors held their quiet gasp for exactly 12 seconds. Ground floor, west corridor, side exit. The magnetized bar would release to her badge with a soft click. Only then did she nod to Tobias. It was time to make the room empty, without making a sound. Quickly but carefully, they removed the cables and sensors. They covered her with a sheet, as if it were just another normal transfer, and went out the side door, pushing the stretcher. The parking lot was empty. The emergency ambulance parked on the corner with the key in the ignition. Lucia opened the back door. Tobias helped lift Sofia carefully. She cried silently. The human touch seemed to hurt more than the scars. Inside the vehicle, Tobias sat next to her. He took her hand, and for the first time, felt what it was like to be in the right place at the right time. Lucia started the engine. The lights of the darkened city were reflected in the glass. The hospital was left behind, growing smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. If your heart is racing with them in this ambulance, tap the like button so this story can reach more people as we drive deeper into it. The siren was off. They didn't want to alert anyone on the road. The world seemed different, darker, emptier, but also cleaner. It was dangerous, yes, but there was something there that hadn't been felt in a long time, a glimmer of hope. Tobias rested his head against the window with his eyes closed and said, almost in a whisper, "This time, I'm going to do it right." The road stretched endlessly into the darkness. The city lights were now far away. The asphalt cut through the open countryside where only the wind and the ambulance's headlights moved. Inside, the silence was filled with tension. Sofia slept weakly with her head on Tobias's shoulder. Lucia drove with steady hands on the wheel, her gaze fixed, but her heart was beating too fast. "Is it far?" asked Tobias, without taking his eyes off Sofia. "About 20 minutes," replied Lucia, looking in the rearview mirror. "After the bridge, there's a village. There's a nun who helps hide people." He nodded. His head hurt. His body hurt too. But what weighed most heavily on him was the certainty that this had to go well. Not for him, but for her. And that's when lights appeared in the rearview mirror, bright and fast. "Shit," muttered Lucia. "Someone's coming after us." Tobias looked back. A black car was accelerating very fast. "Lucia, don't stop, I'm trying," complained the ambulance engine, but it was heavy. The black car got closer, so close that you could see 2 men inside. Serious faces, dark windows. "They're going to crash," shouted Tobias. "Hold on tight." The impact came hard from the side. The ambulance almost left the road. Lucia held on tight and managed to maintain control, but the other car was going faster. Another impact. Tobias pulled Sofia's body close, protecting her with his arms. Her blood began to fall on his coat, a trickle running down his arm. No one noticed at first. Another curve, another impact, and then a sharp, direct shot. Tobias made a low sound. His hand went straight to the side of his body. Blood. Lots of blood. "No, no," Lucia screamed, looking quickly behind her. "They hit you." He just nodded, his eyes slowly closing. "Keep going. Don't stop. No matter what happens, you have to take her." Lucia was crying, but kept the ambulance moving. "Don't say that, doctor. We're going to make it. I'll take care of both of you." He shook his head. "No, you have to go alone now." She looked at him, not understanding. "No, I'm not leaving you here." But Tobias was already struggling to open the side door of the ambulance. Every movement was a new pain, but he was determined. "Grab her. Carry her in your arms. Quick. Take the bag with the medicines. Get out the side door. I'll distract them. I'll drive the ambulance somewhere else." Lucia hesitated. She was crying and sweating. Her hands were shaking. "Please," he said weakly. "Take her alive and safe. That's all I ask." She looked him in the eyes and saw that it was the last time. She took Sofia in her arm, opened the door carefully, and stepped softly onto the wet grass beside the road. She disappeared into the darkness of the night with a broken heart. Tobias returned to the wheel. The black car was already almost level with them. He looked in the rearview mirror and smiled for the first time in years. He felt something different. Peace. He put his hand on the broken crucifix he still kept in his pocket and squeezed it tightly. Blood dripped from his fingers, and then, in a whisper, as if talking to himself, he said, "Now I am healing someone." Rain began to needle the windshield, turning the bridge ahead into a slick ribbon of steel and shadow. He killed the siren, kept the hazards on, just another stalled unit limping toward the river. The black sedan tucked into his blind spot, inching up for a nudge. Tobias eased left, then feathered the brake. The sedan slid a half-length forward, greedy. A muzzle flash pinpricked the night. The driver's window star-cracked. A hot sting bloomed under his ribs. His fingers closed around the broken crucifix in his pocket until the metal bit. For an instant, the world narrowed to the bite, to a memory of a door sealing shut, to the quiet certainty that this time he would not step back. The bridge's steel grating hummed under the tires. Wind shoved at the high box of the ambulance, trying to tilt it toward the guardrail. He rode the line, giving the sedan no clean angle. Left mirror full of black paint, right mirror full of river. Another round sparked off the rear hinge. Something clattered loose in the patient bay. He exhaled slow. The cross in his palm felt warm now, as if a thread were being drawn tight through the brake. The far end of the span split. City to the left, the service road to the right, a narrow curve skirting a gravel shoulder that dropped to scrub and dark. He set his jaw, watched the sedan commit to his bumper, and chose the lane that would pull it away from the trees. Then he turned the wheel. He turned the steering wheel, and the ambulance veered to the right, picking up speed. The men in the back accelerated and disappeared around the curve. Lucia, hidden among the trees, held Sofia against her chest with tears in her eyes, knowing that this man had just given his life to fix a decision that had never left him in peace. A few weeks passed with no news. The doctor and the ambulance disappeared. The world continued as usual, hurried and noisy, distracted. But in a village hidden among mountains and silent fields, something new began to emerge. In a small, unadorned church with peeling walls and benches worn by time, a woman reappeared. She walked slowly, her body still weak, but her eyes were steady and alive, full of purpose. Sofia de la Cruz now lived there. And if you want to follow more stories where broken lives find a second chance like hers, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. She cared for sick children, helped with healing, prepared food, and told stories. Her hands, once marked by pain, now gave comfort, and the smiles she received in return were like a daily miracle. Every grateful glance, every small touch, healed a piece of what she had lost. In the center of the church, just above the simple altar, there was a crucifix. It was small, old, but different. It was broken and repaired, held together not with gold or glue, but with thick thread carefully twisted together, surgical thread. The scar in the center of the cross was not hidden. It was visible, a visible reminder that yes, it was broken, but it was also saved. Just below it was a small plaque of light wood with simple letters engraved by hand, in memory of the doctor who gave me back my life. No one knew who he was except her. And sometimes, when the day ended and the sun hid behind the hills, Sofia would sit alone on the last pew in the church, looking at the repaired cross. She would close her eyes and say softly, "Thank you, doctor." It wasn't just because of the escape. It wasn't just because of the sacrifice. It was because, even though it was late, he decided to love. He decided to save. He decided to do the right thing. And then, silence. But within that silence, a question could be heard loud and clear. How many times does someone die inside before truly living again? If this story touched your heart, write in the comments. I believe in second chances. And if you want to hear more stories that heal the soul, subscribe. There is still much to tell.